You're listening to Kate Palmer from sparkletart.com, and today I'm going to show you beautiful garbage, or Lindy's sprays, on recycled or craft card. So I have some of this recycled cardboard from the back of a paper pack. Now I've been saving this for a while, I just wasn't quite sure what for. I have a hard time throwing things out sometimes, especially when they look perfectly good. So I've been hanging on to a few of these. It's the kind of cardboard that you'll find on calendars or even cereal boxes. It's a little bit floppier than your average craft cardstock, but that doesn't mean that you can't use it and make something gorgeous. For this particular project, I'm going to be using the Under the Boardwalk set from Lindy's Stamp Gang. Now these are some of the new flat sprays, and they all have a white base, so they make beautiful pastel colours. Now they're going to react a little bit differently on this recycled card than they will on normal cardstock, mainly because it's so absorbent. And you'll see what I mean when I start spraying here. Now to start this off, I'm going to add basically every colour in that whole set to this piece of craft cardstock. So I'm going to start with the orange creamsicle and just randomly spray it on the cardstock. This one's a no-brainer, you don't need to think. In fact, don't think at all. Next, I'm going to add some of the beautiful pink, and this is just the most gorgeous colour, and it's called Raspberry Lemonade. Again, you can see I'm just kind of randomly squirting. That's all you really need to do. Next, I'm going to add a little of the Tilt-A-Wheel Teal. Now, whilst these colours look quite dark while they're wet, just wait to see what happens when they're dry. Now, the little white spots are from the chalky white base to the colours here, and I love incorporating them into projects. I'm adding a little bit more of the orange creamsicle, and I'm just going to keep layering until I'm happy with the colour. So I've also added a little of the merry-go-round green, and I'm splattering a little bit of that on to intentionally get some more of those spots. And then I'll add in a little bit of the Pop Rock purple, and I think purple might be one of my favourite colours this year. So once you've got the cardstock adequately covered, you don't want any of that craft colour showing through, and you've flicked a few spots on, add a few more layers. Don't make too much of a mess, make sure it doesn't go muddy, but just make certain that the colour really shows, because as this dries, it will get paler and more pastel. Once it's dry, cut it down to the size you'd like to use. For this project, I'm just going to need the size of a card front, so I'll keep the rest for something else. And I'm going to spray some of the same colours on white cardstock for two reasons. One, you'll see the difference between the colours on craft and the colours on white, and two, it's going to make instantly coordinating colours for my final project. You can see I've just torn these little strips of cardstock, and I'm just going to spray each of the colours onto the card. So Raspberry Lemonade, Merry-Go-Round Green, Tilt-A-Wheel Teal, Orange Creamsicle, and Pop Rock Purple, and then leave these to dry. Now that my strips of paper are dry, you can see how gorgeous and bright they are. I've just got a stamp that has a few background elements and a few foreground elements. I'm going to use my grey archival ink pad to stamp just little snippets, little parts of this stamp onto my little strips. Just use bits, you don't want to be too identifiable, you're just looking for a little bit of visual interest here. Now once you've finished stamping the strips, stamp one full image using black archival ink. It needs to be waterproof so that you can paint over the top or colour with watercolours if you like. Stamp this on white cardstock so that you can use it later. Next, what I'm going to do is kind of fun. On my background, I'm going to have a play with all of those strips and see how I like the look of them best. What I'm aiming for on my finished card here is to have a little bit of each of those colours showing, but so that none of them kind of overwhelm the others. So I like to have a play with the positioning of the strips so that each of them sort of peek through. When you think you've got the placement right, use Liquitex Matte Medium to glue these onto the card. Now I'm using this particular product for two reasons. Number one, it glues really, really well. Number two, if you're a little bit messy, like I am, then any that sort of seeps out the edges, because it's matte, it's not immediately noticeable because you don't have that shiny effect to the glue that you get with a lot of other products. and especially on craft cardstock, which is very matte, and with the Lindy's products I've used, which have dried matte on this, that's just the perfect thing. Next, I'm going to add the element of texture to my card, and I'm going to do this using a stencil, and this is mini quatrefoil from Crafters Workshop, some golden light modelling paste, and I'm going to mix in some of the Magicals from Lindy's. Now this one's a flat magical, and I'm using Sandra D Sepia, but you could also use any of the browns. I like the flat colours for this because you don't really see the sparkle when you mix it with this particular product. So I'm adding a little bit of the paste just to a piece of scrap paper, or that would be better on a non-stick surface, and adding the tiniest little bit of the Magicals, and then using a palette knife or something else that's nice and flat just to really mix these together well. You need to keep mixing until there are no granules of the Magicals left and you have a beautiful, smooth, evenly coloured paste. This may take a little bit longer than you think because the Magicals are designed to be used with water, so you've really got to work the liquid, and there isn't much of it, from the modelling paste into this. Then use that same palette knife to just sort of spread it randomly on the background. You don't want to cover the whole thing. You also don't want a very perfect pattern. It's supposed to sort of look grungy and a little bit imperfect. Once that's done, leave it to dry and race off and wash that stencil really quickly, or else you could ruin it. Now once the modelling paste is dry on the card, I'm going to add a little bit of Luxe with Inca Gold. Now this is just a gold wax paste. There's lots of them on the market. You can use any of them, but this is the one I've got. I'm using a Q-tip or a cotton bud to apply it just to the raised areas. And the more carefully you go, the better your result will be because you'll get a much more crisp and detailed image. You can use your finger, and I often do, but I find that you'll get quite a bit of the gold on the background, and if you'd like a crisper look to your image, it's better to use the cotton bud or Q-tip. As the final step, I'm cutting out some of the butterflies on that black image I stamped earlier in the clip, and I'm colouring them with flat Magicals in Hibiscus Rose and one of the sparkly Magicals in Teapot Purple. I'm just adding a little bit of water to the cap, mixing a tiny amount of Magicals with that, and applying the product direct from the lid. Once these are dry, I'm going to glue them onto my card with some double-sided foam tape and add some glossy accents to really make them sparkle. I've used the leftover Magicals to colour a little wooden embellishment so that everything just goes together. Now once all this is dry, I'm going to mount it onto some coordinating cardstock. And this is my finished card. I'll admit it's quite subtle, very pastel, a little bit girly, but really, isn't it beautiful garbage? This is how you make your garbage sparkle. Well, sparkle tart style anyway, with Lindy's Stamp Gang. You can see that the butterflies really stand out nicely, and I think that's because they're slightly raised. Also, all of those beautiful colours in the background coordinate just so beautifully with those coloured strips of cardstock, and that's because it's the same colours. All of that, when you put it together with that texture and the gold, really gives the card a luxe look. It's just subtle but so pretty. Anyway, I hope I have encouraged you to go and look through your garbage and perhaps use a few of those bits of paper from your stash that have just been waiting for a little bit of love. I'll be back with more soon. Bye!